Today I'm in Tiptonville, Tennessee to take a look at the boyhood home of Carl Perkins. I'll also mention for the most part of this video, I took out the background noise as being so close to a main highway. The loud noise from big trucks and cars and all going by was too hard for me to talk over and you understand me. And also a lot of people would like to maybe pause to read this sign and not hear background noise in it when they're trying to read this sign as I go along. I will mention a few of the things on the sign in case you don't want to stop and pause it to take time to read the entire thing. The sign will tell you that Carl Perkins was born near Tiptonville. A lot of the places, though, I have read, it says he was born in Tiptonville. It also will tell you that he was the son of sharecroppers. It will also mention that he had only the one song that he's mainly noted for as being a hit, and that is Blue Suede Shoes. Carl Perkins himself even wrote that song, but most people are going to remember that Elvis Presley was more famous for singing it. The sign will tell you that he had a guitar style that celebrities like Eric Clapton and George Harrison of the Beatles and countless others liked that sound and went by it. As I head on over to take a closer look at the boyhood home, I'll mention a couple of more things that was on the sign. It said in 1947, Carl Perkins' family moved near Jackson, Tennessee, and that's just right out of Memphis, Tennessee. And it also mentions that Carl and his two brothers began performing in local clubs nearby. And one other thing it says is who some of the people recorded his songs. It also mentions that at his funeral, people such as Garth Brooks, George Harrison, Jerry Lee Lewis, Johnny Cash, and hundreds of others were there. As we get closer to take a look at the boyhood home, I will mention that I will elaborate more on some of the things that were on the sign and additional information that I found out as I went along. Carl Perkins' house at one time, I believe, was considered the visitor center too, and this place is still called the Carl Perkins Visitor Center, even though it's not in the house anymore. There's a new building in this parking lot area that I'm walking through that's got it. I was here about getting close to lunchtime, and evidently the people that are open the visitor center were out to lunch. And I will mention this is like the third time over many years that I have visited this center, and I've never actually got to go in it because it's always been closed. I had talked to the lady earlier when I was checking on it, and she says it's usually open though from like 8 to 4 every day, with her being out to lunch at certain times, unless she's in a meeting. And so you never know. I guess the other times I were here, she must have been out to a meeting. But I am going to take a look around the house and before they get back, or if they even come back today. And I am just really shocked as I start walking around to see that the house is in such ill repair. I can't believe that it's went down so bad in the last few years and it's got to this shape that it's in. But let's just take a closer look at it all. As I come up on the first window, the curtains look real old in there, but there was a blockage so I couldn't see inside the window if anything. Oh, this is very unhappy sight to see. It looks like weeds and all growing up in there by the window on that one. Well, I don't remember ever taking a walk around to the back of the house, so let's take a look and see what it looks like. Oh, I'm really shocked now to see that the door is open and everything inside looks like it is just unbelievably in bad shape. But I'll give you a little view of what I'm seeing, and I just can't believe how this little community has let this building get in this kind of shape. I'll mention that I had looked up that the population of Tiptonville in 2022 was 503. So it is a very small town, but looks like they could have got some kind of help or something to keep this building at least updated enough that it's not like this. I'll just mention a few things about Carl Perkins as I look into maybe the next window and walk around the house a little more. On the sign out front, it mentioned that Carl was the son of sharecroppers, and that would be Mary Louise and Bonnie Perkins. His mom just went by Louise, and his dad went by Buck Perkins. And I'm sorry there's a glare at this window, but I just kind of wanted you to see what's going on with the house and all. I've also read where at a very early age that Carl would work in the cotton fields there in West Tennessee along with his parents, and that he enjoyed listening on Saturday nights to the Grand Ole Opry on his dad's radio. I read another interesting story on Carl Perkins. It said that at an early age, of course, he loved listening to the Grand Ole Opry and hearing the music on there and all, and he would ask his dad for a guitar, and they were so poor at the time that his dad couldn't afford to buy him one, so he made him a guitar out of a cigar box and a broomstick. It said eventually a neighbor would sell to Carl's dad an old worn-out Gene Autry guitar, but they couldn't afford new strings when they broke, so Carl would just retie the strings on the old guitar. Also on the sign out front, it mentioned that Carl started playing music in local clubs with his two brothers, and I've already mentioned his mom and dad, but he also had just two siblings, and those are the ones he played with, and that was Jay and Clayton. And speaking of family members, Carl Perkins was only married one time, and it was to Valda Kreider, and he married her in 1953, and they stayed married until his death at age 65. Carl and Valda would have three sons, Stan, Greg, and Steve, and one daughter named Debbie. And here's a look at the front porch of the house, but over to the side I notice a caboose, and it looks like it's been named the Carl Perkins or CP Express, so let's take a look at that. As we take a closer look at the Carl Perkins Express caboose, I'll mention a few more things about Carl. I'd mention the names that was listed on the sign as attending Carl's funeral, but I also read that other famous people such as June Carter Cash was there, Winona Judd, Sam Phillips, Ricky Skaggs, Billy Ray Cyrus, just to name a few more, was also there. And I'd also read somewhere that Billy Ray Cyrus and Ricky Skaggs performed at the funeral, but George Harrison ended the funeral with performing a version of Your True Love. And it looks like a cool cat up there on the caboose as you go to it. And I am going to go up and take a look inside the window to see what it looks like. And it's not got much in it. Of course, the door was locked, so I didn't get to go in. As I had seen that cool cat on the back of the caboose, it reminded me of a couple things that was said about Carl Perkins. He first started recording for Sun Records in Memphis, Tennessee, and Sam Phillips owned it. And it is said that Sam Phillips said after Elvis left Sun Records that he told Carl Perkins, "You're my rockabilly cat now." So I don't know if that's the reason they put that cat on the back of the caboose or not, but I thought that was an interesting story that I'd read about Carl Perkins. Another story that I had read, it said that Paul McCartney of the Beatles once said, "If there were no Carl Perkins, there would be no Beatles." Carl would write or co-write songs that other famous people would sing and record, such as the Beatles, Dolly Parton, the Judds, and Johnny Cash even. And I'll mention Johnny Cash. He toured with him for like a decade as his opening act. Here you're getting a look at the Carl Perkins visitor center sign, at least the Carl Perkins part, looks like the visitor center is still needing to be repainted. And there's a look at the new visitor center they have that doesn't have a sign on it, as this one I think is what they're going to use to go with it. But I'm going to walk over to the first sign that I looked at and tell another Carl Perkins story. 1956, Carl was in Sun Studios recording a song that he had written along with Jerry Lee Lewis when unexpectedly Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley dropped in, and they would do a jam session together. And this group would be referred to over the years and still today as the $1 Million Quartet. 30 years later, in 1986, Carl Perkins would go back to Sun Studios in Memphis and do a tribute album called The Class of 55 with a $1 Million Quartet. The $1 Million Quartet, of course, was Carl, Johnny, and Jerry Lee, but Elvis had passed away, and so Roy Orbison would make up this $1 Million Quartet. As the lunch hour passed and no one returned to the visitor center, we headed toward home, but got a call back from the visitor center saying we should go down to City Hall in Tiptonville to see the Carl Perkins display if we had time. And first thing I noticed when I walked in was that Carl Perkins Parkway sign. But here's a display on Carl Perkins things. As I pan around there to give you a view of the items here on display, I'd like to mention that Carl was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Rockabilly Hall of Fame, Memphis Music Hall of Fame, and the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. He also received a Grammy Hall of Fame award for his song Blue Suede Shoes. And here is an auto harp that belonged to Carl's mom that you're seeing. And I would like to say, as you look at his outfit, it's not as elaborate as many of them, but Carl Perkins did have a flair about him, more so in his later years. And you'll see a picture of that on his marker at his gravesite when we leave here. And there's a cap referring to Carl Perkins as the Rockabilly King. But probably the most notable thing to notice in this display case is the picture there of the $1 Million Quartet, which had Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, Johnny Cash, and Elvis Presley in it. Well, this will wrap up the video part in Tiptonville, Tennessee, and we'll head on over to Jackson, Tennessee, specifically the Ridgecrest Cemetery there in Jackson, Tennessee, to see the gravesite of Carl Perkins. Rivercrest Cemetery in Jackson, Tennessee is a rather large cemetery, but I'd already did some research on the final resting place of Carl Perkins and his wife Valda before coming to Jackson, and had found out that they are buried in the mausoleum there at the cemetery. So we'll head on up toward the mausoleum. Carl Perkins' mom and dad, Louise and Buck, are buried in a cemetery also in Jackson, Tennessee, but it's not this one, so we won't be going over there today. I'll also mention that Carl and Valda have had two of their sons pass away, and that is Stephen, known as Steve, and from what I could read and find out on him, he was cremated, and the other one was Gregory, known as Greg, and I think he was the youngest son of Carl. I read his obituary column said that he had had a long illness, and it didn't mention what the illness was, and it also said there would be no visitation at the funeral home. So the burial details I have for him are unknown as well. So we'll head on up toward the mausoleum now. One other mention on Greg's passing is that he would die 3 days after his mom Valda did. I also found out information that said that Valda would pass away in her sleep. And on Carl, he was just 65, as I'd mentioned earlier, when he passed away. but I had read where it said that he had several mini strokes the month before he did die, and that he would pass away from the complications of strokes. As we approach the mausoleums, I'm not sure whether Carl's going to be buried in the first one or the second one, but hopefully we'll find it rather easy, as it's supposed to have his picture on his marker. And I see a couple of pictures here. So we're getting closer, and the closer I get, I can tell that it is Carl picture on it. And I do apologize, the jumping seems to be getting worse as I get closer to the mausoleum. But it's got a nice picture of Carl picking his guitar. And speaking of picking his guitar, there's several guitar picks around his picture there. And up at the top, above his name, it's got a Sun record label, which I think is very appropriate, as that was where Carl Perkins started out with his music at Sun Records. There's also, looks like, a coin there in the picture frame. And people do that, I think, for reasons for memory or good luck. I'm not sure which. But anyway, you see that at a lot of the markers. And next to Carl, of course, is that of his wife, Valda. And it looks like she was a very pretty lady. I'd like to say in closing my video today, thank you so very much for watching it. And have a good day.